Ellie turned the key in the newly changed locks at her grandmother's place, letting herself inside the brightly lit living room. Her grandmother always kept a key in the second flower pot on the left side of the door so that none of the family members had to ring the bell and disturb her to open it. She quickly walked inside and closed the door behind her, looking around the empty space. "Grandma?" she called out, but there was no response. Ellie turned around as if on instinct, and just as she had expected, a small post-it was waiting for her just beside the key holder on the wall. Ellie tore it off and read the trembling handwriting which belonged to her favorite person in the whole world. "Ellie, the jewelry box is somewhere in the attic. Take whatever you need. I have to rush to the doctor for an appointment I completely forgot about. I will be back soon. Love, Grandma." Ellie shook her head, realizing how this had happened countless times before. Her grandmother never remembered the thousands of things she always had to do and made plans, and always rushed off at the last minute. But Ellie did not really need her here today. She was only here for the jewelry. Being a theater major, Ellie had finally found an astoundingly big break for herself to direct a play in one of the leading production houses of Washington, and was directing a play set in the 70s. All she needed was some old jewelry for her cast members to give the play a more authentic and timeless feel, and her grandmother had quite a lot of such pieces. Ellie did not waste any time in climbing up to the attic, letting herself inside the darkened room. She had spent countless hours in her childhood hovering around, outside and inside the attic, and just being here always felt nostalgic. The room smelled of dust and forgotten things, as dim light filtered through the cracked wooden panels. As intrigued as Ellie was to be inside the attic all alone without her grandmother's supervision, she had no time to dig up secrets. Her grandmother had always made sure that no one was touching the precious things she kept safely up here. But now Ellie could touch and see whatever she wanted. But she only needed the old jewelry. "Where could it be?" she whispered to herself, her hands perched on her waist as her thick blonde hair lay open behind her. The chill in the room had turned her already rosy cheeks even more pink, and as Ellie accidentally glanced at her reflection in the mirror, she noticed how much she looked like her grandmother. Ignoring that, Ellie continued to rummage through the clutter comprised of old photo albums, yellowed books, and forgotten Christmas decorations. Just then, her eyes landed on a small, antique wooden box which was tucked away safely in one corner. It definitely looked like a jewelry box. "Found it!" Ellie exclaimed excitedly, carefully making her way towards it. As she picked the box up, she realized how heavy it was, but what surprised her even more was how the box seemed to be locked shut. Ellie continued to use force to pry it open until it finally gave way and opened up. Ellie's brows furrowed at what was before her, because where she had been expecting pearls and brooches, she had found something completely different instead. The box was filled with letters, dozens and dozens of letters folded away in old-looking envelopes with stamps that were not even available anymore. Ellie was confused but excited, wondering if she had accidentally bumped into her grandfather's love letters to her grandmother. The two of them had shared a whirlwind romance until they eloped in Las Vegas and spent a happily ever after together. It would be quite a joy to read their love letters. Ellie quickly scanned the dates and noticed the letters were all from 1968 to 1970, which was strange because her grandparents had not met until 1973. But the letters were still all addressed to her grandmother. What could this mean? Did Grandma have another lover? Ellie wondered, even more excited at the prospect. Despite the closeness her grandmother shared with her, she had never mentioned another lover, and Ellie was a little disappointed at not being privy to this information already. She went to the bottom of the box and picked up the first letter, carefully opening it to read. The ink was faded, but the writing was eerily neat, as if someone had written it with precision. January 12th, 1968. Seattle, Washington. Dearest Annie, have I ever told you that you are sweet? If I haven't, then I must tell it to you now. I think you are much too sweet for someone like me. I have read all the 5 letters you have already written to me, even if I have not replied to them, but your honesty and earnestness compel me to write this to you. You remind me of springtime in Vermont and the blossoming of marigolds in the yellowest fields and winter sunflowers. You shine like the sun with your gold hair and pink cheeks. You are beautiful, Annie. Do not think that I do not notice the glances you throw my way at college and the way you always try to walk with me. I believe you have memorized my schedule with the way you somehow always manage to show up whenever my classes end. You are something, truly. But my head, it's somewhere darker these days, Annie. And believe me, I am not saying this because you are younger. I know you are a sophomore while I am a senior, but I respect your emotions just the same. I wish I could love you the way you want me to. But I think you already know there is someone else. There has always been someone else. Everyone in college knows about my love for Diane, and I have seen the way you look at us. You have no hatred or jealousy, but plain sadness. And that breaks my heart. You must forget about me, Annie. It is for the best. Yours, Ted Bundy. Ellie's hand began to feel numb as she read the signage, the letter falling from her hand. Her breath hitched. No, it could not be, she thought. Her grandmother could not have been in love with Ted Bundy, but all of it made sense. Like any other person in America. Ellie, too, had done ample research on Ted Bundy and could see that all the facts fit. Ted Bundy went to the same university as her grandmother, and he graduated in 1968. And most of all, everyone knew his infamous love for Diane Edwards, who rejected him, which was one of the reasons he turned into a cold-blooded serial killer. All of it made sense. With shaking hands, Ellie quickly fetched the next letter and began to read. February 17, 1968, Seattle, Washington. Dear Annie, why do you keep insisting on us meeting? The last and only letter I wrote to you was supposed to be the only correspondence from my end, because I do not wish for you to get stuck to someone like me. I am too jaded for you, much too old, much too cynical, and much too dark. Stop writing to me and move on with your life. I respect your emotions and the love you have for me, but please believe me when I say this, that it is only the idea of me that you love. You do not even know me as a person, Annie. How could you love me? You must stop and move on, please. Best regards, Ted Bundy. Ellie was certain. Her grandmother was madly in love with Ted Bundy to the point that she kept writing to him even when he asked her not to. It did not surprise Ellie after everything she knew about Bundy already. He was good-looking, charming, and well-spoken. He could make anyone fall for him if he wished, and her grandmother was young and naive at the time. She might have simply fallen for his exterior charms. Ellie continued to read. March 20th, 1968. Seattle, Washington. Dearest Annie, yes, it is true. You keep asking endlessly, so I must answer you once and for all. Diane has left me. She thinks I am immature and unambitious, and will end up doing nothing in life. She says she does not want to be with someone like me who has no will to succeed and become someone. She says she deserves better and must only fall for someone with the prospect of an excellent future. It is true she has broken my heart to pieces, but it was not a surprise. I had been expecting it for some time now. Diane was becoming distant for the past few months. She was opting out of spending time with me and was always rude. Nothing I did made her happy, which was precisely what threw me in a dark place. She finally sealed the deal and left me to be miserable and alone. But no, Annie. That does not mean I would let you become a part of my sorrow and enter my life. I would never be so unfair to someone as kind, loving, warm, and bright as you. You must forget about me. Stop writing to me, Annie. I won't be replying anymore. Love it, Ted Bundy. He had clearly broken his promise about not replying again because there were several more letters written by him in the following months. Ellie could see how his words were clearly written by a broken man as he suffered heartbreak. He spoke endlessly about Diane Edwards and how she had broken his heart. He mentioned that he would never be able to forgive her rejection. Ellie could see that in her one-sided love, her grandmother had become a listening ear and a consoling shoulder for Ted Bundy. Ellie could not blame her grandmother because women often did the dumbest things when in love. But through the letters, it seemed as if the two of them never really met. They wrote to each other, the frequency of Ted Bundy's replies increasing, but it was evident they never met one another. Ellie picked up another letter. August 22nd, 1968. Seattle, Washington. My lovely Annie, I see Diane everywhere I go, Annie. Whenever I see a girl with long brown hair that are parted perfectly from the middle, or a girl who laughs Diane's soft, rich laugh, or someone who flips their hair and smiles prettily, I see her. I see her pale skin in every girl at my new job and the diner where I have my dinners and no matter where I go. It angers me to be able to see her and how I cannot forgive her or let her go. She pinches me in ways I do not want to be pinched, and I wish I could erase all her memories from my mind. Perhaps then I would be better, and I would be able to feel again, and think again, and be myself again. I see her everywhere, but not in you. Now that I have graduated, I miss seeing your sunshine hair and golden smile on campus. You are too gentle and too warm, Annie, and you keep loving me without fail. Even when I am suffering the heartbreak of another, you keep loving me. And you are never shy in accepting or expressing it. I often wonder if this is all you want in life, for me to love you back. I am so absorbed in my own heartbreak that I completely forget about yours. It cannot be easy for you to keep loving me without fail and without return. Why do you keep loving me so? Tell me, Annie, please stop. Love the Ted Bundy. Ellie's hands trembled as she read his name again and again, written on every letter like a reminder. In all her life, she could have never imagined that her own grandmother was in contact with a brutal serial killer like Ted Bundy. It was all too unreal to be believable, but the truth was right in front of her. She went further, noticing several other letters written in 1968. The letters grew more frantic as time passed, getting longer and nonsensical. They seemed like the proof of Ted Bundy beginning to lose his mind due to heartbreak. Ellie could see the signs on the page, his obsession and hatred with Diane Edwards growing with every single letter. She was surprised how her grandmother was ignoring everything for love, but that was what women always ended up doing. The tone shifted even further in 1969 as the letters reduced in number and length. But it seemed that her grandmother still continued to write with the same passion and fervor. Ellie finally understood what all those reports meant, which described Ted Bundy as so charming that it was easy for him to escape from the crimes he committed. Her grandmother was clearly obsessed with this man, and it was all because of his charm. Ellie reached for the last two letters, picking up the second last one first. April 4th, 1969. Seattle, Washington. My darling Annie, I must tell you that I miss you. I miss your warm smile and your bright eyes, and I think it has been too long since I have seen you. I have taken a break from everything, and I am planning to return to life again. I believe I need a break to try to find a way out of this darkness. I am driving south next week, down to California. I believe a change of scenery will be helpful for me. Will you come with me, Annie? Will you become my companion in this trip and hold my hand when I need someone to hold it? I think I need someone to keep me steady while I try to figure out my life and what I need to do. And who else can help me but you? You love me with such intensity that I almost believe I can fall in love with you too. I think you can help me forget her by being beside me. I think you can heal my breaking heart. I believe if there is anyone who has a hold on me right now, it is you. You are the woman who loves me. You are my friend, and no one understands the condition of my heart better than you do. I need someone who understands me, Annie, which loosely translates to me needing you. Please do not deny me the pleasure of your company, my darling. I will be waiting for your reply. And I believe it will be a yes. We leave in 1 week. With love, Ted Bundy. Chills ran down Ellie's spine as she read the frantic invitation, seeing it for what it was. All the flowery words of love and poetic phrases were nothing but a manipulative tactic for her grandmother to agree for the road trip. Ellie could see it clearly, because only until the last letter he had been curt, rude, and dismissive, and had only talked about his sadness. Now he suddenly wanted to find ways to fall in love with her grandmother. Ellie knew he was lying blatantly, but she also knew that her grandmother must have been unable to see it for what it was. She held the last letter, which was dated much later, and in between that time, there were no other letters. It only meant one thing. Her grandmother must have gone to the trip. Ellie tore open the last letter, beginning to read. March 7th, 1970. Seattle, Washington. Annie, this letter has been long overdue. I know I should have written to you much earlier, much earlier, but I was too lost and I did not know what to say. You were there for me when no one else was, and when I had been left with no hope in this world. You stood beside me in my difficulty and sadness, and I was extremely unfair to you. Do not think that I don't feel the absence of your letters, because even in my worst days, whenever I came across a letter from you, I somehow managed to smile. I miss smiling, Annie. This letter is in no way an attempt to resume our correspondence, because I know that ship has sailed. I never deserved someone like you, and I still don't. What I did to you was wrong, but at least it might have helped you see me for who I truly am. I am not someone normal, Annie, and I think you finally saw it for yourself. It has been months since I have seen you, or heard you and read your words. But you don't look like her, Annie. When I asked you to go with me on that road trip, I thought I could make you pay for what she did to me. But it did not work. Your hair is the wrong color, and your skin is much too pink. You smile too easily and you laugh too loud. You are nothing like Diane, and I kept staring at you, trying to think of everything Diane had done to me, but I could not make myself see it. I just could not do it. I could not do anything to someone as pure and kind and beautiful as you. Someone who only made one mistake, loving me. You deserve better, Annie. You deserve a man who would love you the way you love others. As for me, I will find someone else. I will continue to spiral downward in this darkness. I just wanted to explain to you that I have not forgotten you, and I never will. Thank you for being my friend when I had no one. Thank you for loving me despite my strangeness. And do not write to me again. And I won't write to you either. It was a privilege knowing you, and perhaps in some lifetime we might finally learn to be together. With love, Ted Bundy. A tear ran down Ellie's eye, making her wonder what she was crying for. The sadness in Ted Bundy's letter was evident to her, and she could not even imagine how much it would have broken her grandmother's heart. He had never loved her grandmother, but he had clearly cared about her enough to let her go. In her shock and sadness, Ellie failed to hear the creaking sound of the attic ladder as her grandmother climbed upstairs. Before she knew it, her grandma was standing right outside, her shadow on the wall in front of Ellie. "Ellie?" she called out, and Ellie quickly turned around, the letters still clutched in her hands. She had no desire to hide them. "Grandma, what is this?" she asked, quickly wiping the tear away. "You are crying. That might only mean that you have read all the way through till the last letter," her grandmother commented, and Ellie quickly nodded. Her grandmother stood frozen for a long moment, simply staring at the letters in Ellie's trembling hands. She took the letters from her, the pages appearing frill in her wrinkled fingers. Finally, she sank onto the top of an old wooden trunk which was shut closed but still remained silent. Ellie remained silent too, not wanting to force her grandmother to talk. "Grandma, are you all right?" Ellie finally asked, after several moments had gone by. "I never thought anyone was going to find them, at least not in my lifetime. I did not even remember they were here when I wrote you that note about going up to the attic. It has just been so long," her grandmother sighed, leafing through the letters one after the other. Ellie's heart pounded. "These are from Ted Bundy, Grandma. So you knew him?" Ellie asked, even though she already knew the answer. She still wanted to hear it directly from her grandmother to fully believe it. "Since you have already read the letters, Ellie, I think you know that I was in love with him," her grandmother whispered. "But he never loved me back. Not even for a little while. He only ever loved one woman, and that was Diane Edwards. I was nothing more than just the girl who loved him, and he treated me as nothing more than a distraction, a poor substitute for the woman who broke him. All he ever used me for was a shoulder to cry on." Ellie felt cold all over. "And the road trip he invited you on, did you go with him?" Ellie asked, her mind reeling. Her grandmother hesitated before replying. "I did. It was in the spring of 1969 when he invited me, and I skipped all my classes just to go with him. We drove from Seattle all the way to California, and in the beginning it all felt nice. It was like a fairy tale come true because I could not believe that we were spending so much time together. He never made a pass on me, or tried to flirt, or kiss, or even have sex. He was being light and breezy, and we were having fun. It almost felt as if my love had somehow healed him, and I was ecstatic. Truly. But something was seriously wrong with him. As time passed, I noticed this darkness in him which I could not understand. Her voice cracked. Ellie quickly interjected, "What darkness?" "It was in the small things, Ellie. He was too loud at times, or sometimes had these bitter thoughts that seemed extravagantly brutal, or sometimes he was rude to a random passerby. I could see that he was filled with anger inside him. One night, we stopped on the side of the road near Sacramento, and I suddenly woke up. As I opened my eyes, I saw him just sitting there staring at me. There was this rage in his eyes. Gone was the carefree Ted of the past few days, and it was replaced by someone with a set jaw and anger inside them. Just as I made sense of it all, he looked away," her grandmother explained. "Were you not scared?" Ellie asked, goosebumps running along her skin. "I was terrified. But his expression completely changed, and I felt okay again. But I knew he was not having kind thoughts in that moment, even if he let me go. It was only because I did not look like Diane. I had blonde hair and rosy cheeks, and none of that fit his fantasy of a pale girl with sleek brown hair. That was the only reason he let me live. The next morning, he dropped me off at a bus station and told me to go back home. And I did. After that, I never wrote to him again." Her grandmother sighed, tears running down her face. "Not even after his last letter?" Ellie asked, remembering how heartbreaking that letter had been, but also creepy in so many ways. "No," her grandmother shook her head. "I only felt like writing to him when years later I heard about everything he had done. I saw all those women and how they all looked so much like Diane, and I knew then that I could have been one of them if I had looked remotely similar." Ellie sat there staring at her grandmother in shock. She had grown up hearing about Ted Bundy, the charismatic law student and charming killer, the man who had brutally murdered over 30 women in the span of 5 years. But here in her grandmother's attic, she had proof of how none of it began in 1974, but way, way earlier. And her grandmother had only been inches away from being his very first victim. "Why did you keep the letters?" Ellie finally asked, keeping them all away in the box again. Her grandmother smiled sadly before replying, "To remind myself that I had been lucky enough to survive.